Hello and welcome to the News Unlocked, the show that brings you the stories that matter, that separates the news from the noise around us. Today we train our lenses on a very special report. In the run-up to the presidential elections in the United States of America, a slice of history has been created. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has picked Senator Kamala Harris as his choice for vice president nominee. Kamala Harris becoming the first person of Indian American origin to be given the vice presidential nomination. Remember, if elected in November, she will be the first woman, first African American and first Asian American vice president in the history of the United States. She will not only be breaking a glass ceiling, but for many, Harris definitively represents an America of tomorrow, one which is more racially and ethnically mixed. And so will her choice be a ticket to victory for Joe Biden, or will it lead to a more divisive campaign and perhaps only end up helping President Trump? Let's first take a look at just the life and times of Kamala Harris.
A groundbreaking candidacy in American politics. The 55-year-old daughter of immigrants, one from Jamaica, one from India, is now the presumptive Democratic nominee for the U.S. Vice President.
Your next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has named Kamala Harris as his running mate. Her nomination seems calculated, a political strategy in a nation shaken by social unrest over police brutality against African Americans, and a counter-narrative to Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric.
We're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change. America is crying out for leadership.
Kamala Harris is a California senator, a former attorney general from the same state. She's no stranger to presidential campaign either. Harris herself sought Democratic nomination for the top job before she dropped out of the race in December last year because of financial reasons. She's now got a shot at a ticket to vice presidency.
The excitement is palpable, but there are also some doubts. While younger Indian Americans are excited and thrilled to have Harris on the ticket, some in the older generation are raising some questions. It's no secret that Senator Harris and other Democrats in the U.S. Congress have been critical of India and what's been happening in Jammu and Kashmir since last August. So the older generation Indian Americans feel that the Democratic Party has become beholden to forces that are unfriendly to India.
Now remember, Kamala Harris is the first woman of part Indian descent to reach this position in US politics. Remember, her father is Jamaican, her mother was from Chennai. It's a position that has been long reserved, many say, for white Americans only. What will Kamala Harris, though, bring to the Indo-US diplomatic table? What are her views on India? Take a look.
Daughter of two immigrant parents, Joe Biden's newly announced running mate for the U.S. presidential elections is the first person of part Indian descent to vie for the second highest post in the country. And in her first speech after being nominated, California Senator Kamala Harris paid homage to her roots.
My mother and father, they came from opposite sides of the world to arrive in America. One from India and the other from Jamaica, in search of a world-class education. But what brought them together was the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And that's how they met, as students in the streets of Oakland, marching and shouting for this thing called justice, in a struggle that continues today.
But her relevance to India is not just because of her Indian roots.
Will you tell me about this beautiful thing?
The senator has been a vocal critic of the Narendra Modi government's decision to repeal Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir.
So often when we see human rights abuses, whether they be in this country or around the world, the abuser will convince those that they abuse that nobody cares, and that nobody's watching, and that nobody's paying attention, which is a tool of an abuser. And so that is part of what I would say. We are watching.
Kamala Harris has also targeted External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar a few months ago. She had criticized Jaishankar's refusal to meet Pramila Jayapal, who had introduced a resolution in the United States Congress urging India to lift communication restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. When PM Narendra Modi wowed America with the Howdy Modi event in Texas, Kamala Harris's absence was noticed. The event was seen as an endorsement for President Donald Trump. Now, many foreign affairs experts warn Democrats could become cold to Indian interests if they were to win office.
We mustn't forget that anyone who occupies that high office is first and foremost there to serve the American people and to serve US interests. We might also find ourselves in a situation where she has strong views on human rights issues or on something else that bothers us.
But on immigration and visa rules, Harris might be better than the current administration. Last year, Harris was the lead co-sponsor for legislation to increase the number of green cards that could go to countries like India and China.
Raising issues on human rights issues, minority rights, something that could be a niggling area between India and the United States of America if Kamala Harris were to become vice president. Having said that, Indo-US ties is a continuum and goes beyond just a senator or even a president.
Let's go to my first two guests to get a Washington perspective to Kamala Harris's nomination. Professor Irfan Nuruddin, Director, South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council, is joining me. Seema Siroi, columnist who's based in Washington, joins me. Appreciate both of you joining us. Professor Nuruddin, let me come to you. Is this purely symbolic? In your view, Kamala Harris, is this an attempt being made by the Biden campaign to send out a message at a time of racial unrest that the Biden campaign wants to bridge divides while the Trump campaign wants to increase the divisions in American society?
Rajdeep, it is symbolic, but purely symbolic suggests that it doesn't have an instrumental value. And this is a symbolic gesture that understands where the Democratic Party of 2020 is, where the support base of 2020 is, and with a very clear eye on what the best path to getting to the White House is. So at the end of the day, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, right, what the Biden campaign understands is that mobilization of the core of the Democratic Party base, which is black voters and women, is the path to victory in November. And Senator Harris is an experienced politician who has served her state as senator, as attorney general. She's a known prospect. There are no weaknesses that we don't know about yet. So she was both a very safe and predictable choice, as well as a very bold one because of the symbolic value that it brings to the ticket. So
but the flip side,
it's a great move.
You know, the flip side, Professor Nuruddin, would be that her candidature gives the Trump campaign an opportunity to perhaps polarize the voter even further.
There is no question about that. I mean, look, once Senator Vice President Biden announced that he was going to committing to choosing a woman, then the question became which of these very qualified and talented women could he have as his running mate? In that sense, the question then became, would it be a white woman or would it not be a white woman? And the fact of the matter is that regardless of who he chose, President Trump would have doubled down on a very misogynistic, sexist rhetoric. With Harris, he gets to also play a race card, which he will do, he already has, and his surrogates will. For those for whom that resonates, that's going to be something. But my guess is that many of them would have voted for Trump regardless. The question is whether that rhetoric backfires among suburban women who he's making the suburban housewife, but white suburban women are increasingly moving away from the GOP, and an explicit racial attack against such an incredibly qualified woman is likely to backfire. So this is about getting out the vote. And if this gets out black women, who are the core of the Democratic Party, if this gets out black men, it gets out minority people, gets out young people, then the gamble will pay off. Though, of course, if he loses,
it is a bit of a gamble, but the question is to get in the traditional Democratic voters, particularly black women, you're saying, who could be an important component. Seema Siroi, give us a sense of her views on India. You know, the excitement is because she's part Indian origin, but at the end of the day, her views, particularly on issues like Article 370, are pretty sharp. She stood up to the Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, cancelling meetings in Washington. Is she seen as someone who's part of a left liberal approach towards issues of human rights, so could well be very tough on India on issues like Kashmir?
Okay, so I would not call her an extreme left. She occupies a space somewhere between the moderate democratic positions and the left progressive positions. So she supported Pramila Jayapal. She didn't actually attack the foreign minister herself. She just supported Jayapal as a congressional colleague, which many Democrats did, because it would have been...
let me just tell our viewers, just give our viewers some background on that. Pramila Jayapal was a US Congresswoman who Dr. Jaishankar said he would not meet on his visit, and then Kamala Harris said, well, you can't choose who you meet, and the meeting was cancelled. Go ahead, Seema.
Right. So it was a question of standing up with your colleagues, and, you know, they're all members of the Democratic Party. It would have been very unseemly and not at all right from her point of view not to support Jayapal. So I think too much shouldn't be made out of that. And the one time she was asked a question on Kashmir by an activist, she gave a very somewhat neutral answer that goes with general Democratic Party positions, which is that human rights are a core value for the Democrats. It's another matter that the Republican side has moved so far away, especially under President Trump, that the Democrats, by contrast, look, extremely left. But that's not the right way to look at it. I think if they win, if Biden wins and she's vice president, once you're in office, you're going to look at India and the relationship as, the president and vice president of the United States. I mean, it's a completely different ballgame.
But does she have this strong sort of bond with India?
I think she does. She completely does. She talked about her mother yesterday in her speech, and her sister tweeted the video of the mother, Shyamala Gopalan, the moment Biden sort of announced and she accepted the nomination. So I think too much is being made about the fact that she doesn't acknowledge the Indian side too much. The point is, the mother brought them up as African Americans. Don't forget, the mother was part of the civil rights movement. She married a Jamaican economic student. They were in the throes of this movement, young people. She thought her children are going to be taken as black, not, these finely graded sort of identities that now America has. Indian American and Pakistani American and whatnot.
Okay, let me, Irfan, a quick word, therefore, that do you see her nomination, in a sense, becoming a catalyst for more people of Indian American origin, even in her case, even if you're part Indian American origin, to make these great leaps forward?
I believe so. I mean, what we are clearly seeing in America now, if you remember 12 years ago, we were asking whether black man named Barack Obama, with a funny name, as it were, would be able to be president. He was for 2 terms. We now have the potential that in 2020 we'll have a woman of color, half Jamaican, half Indian. And remember, Rajdeep, she's 55. Mm-hmm. If that happens, she will be the presumptive presidential nominee for the Democratic Party going forward, in a very strong position to actually claim the presidency. That's a game changer for young people looking for role models and for whether they have a place in American public life.
Right.
The other part of it is that Indian American political activism is growing. It's a maturing political activism. You see this at local government levels. You see this in state legislatures across the country. You now have the largest Indian American delegation in Congress ever, right? In Ami Bera, you have a 3-term congressman now who will be running for his 4th term coming up. So the point is, and throughout the administration, in the secretariats, in the department. So I think you're going to see a lot more of this going forward. But of course,
maybe she is a game changer. Maybe she is the game changer that we are looking for.
I mean,
okay,
she's a game changer because she represents really what I think this summer in America has been unlike any summer. I've been in America for 20 plus years, right? I mean, this summer is unlike any summer I've experienced, in the sense that the notion that there is a reckoning coming between America that is really 100 years old, represented by the extreme parts of the Republican Party and often given voice by Trump, and an America that has actually been America now for the last 40 years, that is saying it's our time, it's our turn to be in the front of politics. We're not going to apologize for that. We're not going to take second seat. And Kamala Harris is qualified. She's articulate. She's incredible.
Let me stop both of you, because I want to bring in a moment someone who has been part of her personal journey. I appreciate both of you joining me there from Washington. But let's turn to someone who is very close to Kamala Harris, knows her well. Before that, take a look at Kamala Harris's journey so far, a remarkable one.
Born in Oakland to a Jamaican father and Indian mother in 1964, Kamala Harris grew up in a world of activism in Oakland, California. Kamala and her sister Maya were raised by their single mother, Shyamala Gopalan, a cancer researcher and civil rights activist who had arrived in California back in 1958.
Shyamala went to States when she was 19 years old, after she had finished a BA in home science. Please understand, home science. I think it was Miranda has got home science. She applied to Berkeley on her own. She got fellowship on her own, and she went and did her master's in biochemistry.
Oakland's black culture helped the sisters embrace their biracial identity. Harris won her first election in 2003 when she became San Francisco's district attorney. She was elected California's Attorney General in 2010, the first woman and black person to hold the job. In August 2014, Harris got married to lawyer Douglas Emhoff. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the couple first met on a blind date and got married a year later. Meanwhile, as her national profile grew, Harris built a reputation around her work as a prosecutor. In 2016, she became the first South Asian American to become a US Senator. It was in early 2019 that Harris launched her presidential campaign. She was one of the highest profile contenders in a crowded Democratic primary.
My mother, who raised me and my sister, was a proud woman. She was a brown woman. And because of who my mother was and what she believed, what she had the ability to dream was possible and then work to make possible, the fact that my mother never asked anyone permission to tell her what was possible is why, within one generation, I stand here as a serious candidate for President of the United States.
But the early promise of her campaign eventually faded. Facing fundraising problems, Harris abruptly withdrew from the race in December 2019, 2 months before the first votes of the primary were cast.
Life and Times of Kamala Harris. Joining me now is someone who knows her rather well. Neil Makhija is Executive Director at Impact in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Appreciate your joining us, Neil. You know Kamala Harris very well. What is it that sets her apart? You're going to, I believe, contribute to her campaign as well. What is it that sets Kamala Harris apart? What is so special about her?
So let me just tell you what we do at Impact. We recruit, train, and endorse Indian American candidates nationwide in the United States. And we have seen an explosion of candidates who run and want to be involved in public life. And an example is, in 2012, we had one congressman. After 2016, now we have 5 members of Congress, including Senator Harris in the Senate. And she has been a trailblazer for all of us who are interested in government and civic life, who are Indian Americans. And she has been deeply committed to the community and Impact. When we first launched in 2016, our co-founders, a man named Deepak Raj, who's a philanthropist based out of New Jersey, and Raj Goyal, one of the first state legislators who's Indian American in Kansas. They founded this with the idea to give our community a voice in the political process. And from the beginning, Kamala was on board. And in 2018, she spoke to our summit of over 500 leaders from around the country who are Indian American. And many of us made a commitment then that we were going to build this organization and give our community a voice, because too often with immigrant communities, society is okay with having you in specific roles and industries, but when they aspire to leadership, receive skepticism. So what Kamala is showing the world and showing our community, as well as the African American community, as well as women, she's showing them that no door is closed, and that for every child who dreams and aspires to serve their community, they now have a role model they can look up to.
And is she therefore someone you believe who has been deeply influenced by her mother in a sense? Who even much more than her father, deeply influenced by the way her mother, brought up these 2 young girls, and sort of fiercely independent, but yet rooted in a strange way in the Indian milieu, grew up in Chennai, her mother?
Absolutely. Kamala often cites her mother as her greatest inspiration. And, she has this quote that we really appreciate, which is that she told Kamala, "You may be the first of many, but make sure you aren't the last." And that's something that we think a lot about in our mission with Impact, because Kamala may be the first, but there are 70 Indian American candidates running this year for Congress, for State House, for State Senate, and other positions. And we want to make sure that this is the beginning for our community in American politics.
So is she therefore, as you're saying, to be seen as someone who, if she does win in November, if the Biden ticket does win, will sort of become a trailblazer for all of you young Indian Americans out there? Do you see her, therefore, this year, 2020, in that sense, could really be the breaking of a glass ceiling?
Absolutely. And I think that's already happened, because even last night and the last couple of days, I am having people reach out to me from everywhere saying that they want to be involved, that they want to either knock on doors or donate or help elect her and Joe Biden to be president and vice president of the United States. And that's going to happen in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wisconsin, in very important electoral positions that are going to make the difference in November.
Very quickly, therefore, are you telling me that the Indian American community will be overwhelmingly voting Democrat, you believe, in November?
So the data that we've seen has indicated that was true last time. It was true for Barack Obama. And I think generally Indian Americans value inclusivity, and we don't we are not receptive to this message of Donald Trump about building walls. That's the antithesis of what we believe in and what we know for our experience being, one of the newer immigrant communities in this nation.
Very quickly, Neil, and I have just 10 seconds. Is it true that Kamala makes a terrific dosa?
I've seen the video. I have not tried the dosa, but I will tell you, she, you know, by all accounts is a master chef, and that obviously resonates with many Indian Americans.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. Neil, thanks very much for joining us, giving a sense. We hope to, of course, have you more often as we build up to the big elections. This could be, again, the breaking of another glass ceiling. A woman of part African, Indian, American descent could well be a vice president in the future. Neil Makhija, thanks very much for joining us there from Philadelphia. That's it on this very special show. As always on the News Unlocked, we try to unlock the news without the noise. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.